All right, I think we got everybody on board today. Welcome everybody to the Rivers Coalition meeting for September 23rd. We've got a great group on the agenda today to talk about our challenges sending water south. And from the Water Management District, we thank them for joining us on the call today, and we'll get right into that presentation in a minute. We do have quite a few people join. I'm looking at over 57 participants, I guess. And if you're joining on phone, it'd be nice if you could let us know your name and who's joining on by phone. I appreciate it. Have a couple of numbers, a 904 area code 561. So if you could let us know your name, please, and let us know your representation, I appreciate it. So I see a 904 ending in 9534. Would you identify yourself, or maybe some people might have to call in and use their computer for the video?
Mark, they can put it in the chat too.
Okay, please put it in the chat. And also as we move forward, we'll put in any questions and comments you might have in the chat. It's a great function at the bottom center of your screen that be able to let everybody know on the call, maybe some links that are important, some web links, or other further information about details and stuff like that, as well as questions when we get to that point on the agenda. So appreciate calling to order. We're going to get started with things going just in general. Basically, for the chair's comments, we've had our board meeting. We discussed a lot of things dealing with LOSUM and other events that have been happening and recently with various water projects. So we're excited about updating on that as we go through our agenda. So we want to give everybody enough time to report on things. But to start off with, we have a special presentation. We've asked the South Florida Water Management District to help us out to understand the constraints on sending water south, particularly during different times of the year when we'd like to send more water south for the Everglades in Florida Bay, not have to discharge the estuary. So I've asked them to help us understand that. They're bringing in Drew Bartlett, who's the Executive Director, the Water Management District. Also, the Assistant Executive Director, John Mitnick, is on board. And I see also Carolyn Ansay, who's the General Counsel for the South Florida Water Management District. Thank you again for joining us. Also to acknowledge and thank you to the Mayor of Stuart, Ewell Clark, and others who are joining on the call, and commissioners. I heard Commissioner Matheson and others from the city of Stuart, and also probably from Martin County and other governmental organizations. And I see Corps of Engineers represented too as well. Thank you for the Corps of Engineers being on the call as well. Okay, so Drew, I'd like us to get started and help us understand those constraints, if you will. And
thank you,
Daryl,
Mike.
let them share a screen. Yep.
Yeah, we will share a screen, and I'll go ahead and do a presentation for folks. And Mark, thanks for reaching out and inviting me. It's been a little while since I've visited with the Rivers Coalition, but it's a great organization. And I know you have done a lot of work to really help us, put us in a better position to serve South Florida. So I absolutely appreciate that. Right here, just to point out, Jackie Thurlow-Litvish is our board member representing your area. She, as you all know, does an outstanding job helping us advance change for the better at the South Florida Water Management District. This is a photo of Jackie and I with Dr. Jessica Frost underneath the Roosevelt Bridge, looking at one of our real-time monitoring devices, which I look at almost daily to check out salinity levels in the St. Lucie estuary, just to really understand conditions and what's going on, because that's a very good measure of what we're trying to achieve for our coastal estuaries. And so thank you, Jackie. I just, in case you didn't know, Jackie made the motion to hire me as executive director. It was my favorite motion to date at the South Florida Water Management District.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you.
So basically, this board has been, and this isn't lost on anybody on this call, but this board has been very focused on our mission for ecosystem, restoring our ecosystems. Can you move the people off of the slide? Thanks. And so they are very singularly focused. Obviously, we've got a broader mission at the district, but they came in, said, let's look at this mission and make sure that our priorities and the governor's priorities are front and foremost, which is safeguarding, restoring our resources and our ecosystems in South Florida. Let me see about advancing the slide. Here we go. And as you know, I mean, in the summer of 2018, there was a lot of harmful discharges. There was algae in our estuaries. And that's when Governor DeSantis really had a lot of strong push and desire to improve our environment in South Florida. And then when he took office in 2019, of course, he signed his executive order, which really advanced funding for Everglades restoration. And he really mandated to the South Florida Water Management District 29 priority projects, which fit right into the desire to improve water quality and get our water flowing south. So while the board, I mean, before this board was constrained to move water south, not that that's a wrong word, it's just not a popular word. We strive to move water south at the South Florida Water Management District, and really have been doing everything we can to put ourselves in a position to do that. And so what I want to do today is talk about, we need to go through a little history to figure out where we are today, but then talk about what we're doing to try to even move more water south going into the future. So the Everglades, as everyone has followed along, has changed over time. That's the historic photo. These maps were put together by Dr. McVoy, who used to work for the South Florida Water Management District. Now he's actually a city commissioner where I live. But he put these excellent maps together to show how the changes in South Florida have narrowed the ability for the Everglades to receive and convey water south. And so it's up to us and SERP and all the things that we're doing to try to take that system and retrofit it to, move the kind of water that we used to see going south through the system as we see it today. So let's talk about how we got here. So this is pre-1929, and I borrowed these slides from Dr. Scalar, who runs our Everglades section. And he does this presentation about the changes over time. He has a lot more slides than I'm going to use, but it's pretty interesting stuff. But pre-1929, there were basically local canals, the ones you see here depicted, that provided drainage south of the lake to basically support development and agriculture south of Lake Okeechobee. And then, of course, they started building Tamiami Trail in 1928. But that whole push was because of the gold rush that Florida saw, which was black gold. The muck soils that were south of the lake could just grow an amazing amount of agriculture. And so there was a large influx of people and activities to try to build around agriculture south of the lake, which obviously continues today. And then, of course, in 1928, we had a massive hurricane, really a major loss of life south of the lake. And so the idea of flood control really got launched after that hurricane. And in 1930, the Herbert Hoover Dike was authorized and constructed during the 30s. But beyond the Herbert Hoover Dike, there were a few more hurricanes. And finally, in 1947, the famous Crying Cow report was published out of the Corps of Engineers. This really formed the foundation for the Central and Southern Florida flood control system, the CNSF system, which kind of underpins everything since the CNSF system. And you can see the flood control district was formed, and it looks different. The shape in that logo is different than the flood control, than the South Florida Water Management District. But at the time, that's what it was. And it went up into the features that are in actually the St. Johns River Water management district right now. But that CNSF system really started in, the 30s was the start of the evaluation. It finally got authorized, I think, in 49, and then got put under construction. And in those hurricanes in the 40s, not only did you see flooding, south of Lake Okeechobee, but you saw flooding along the East Coast, and Fort Lauderdale, I'm told, was underwater for a couple of weeks during those hurricane floodings. And so one of the first projects implemented was the Eastern Protective Levee that basically separated the water in the Everglades and controlled the water in the Everglades from the eastern communities. And then you had a levee around the agricultural area to basically control the water in the agricultural area from the Everglades. Of course, you had the dike at the top. And in this, you had 3 pump stations put in place as well, S3, S2, and the S5A, for moving water more rapidly when you're doing flood control operations in this area, which is the EAA. And so that flood control purpose, that was the first phase of CNSF. And then around the 50s, you started looking at not only flood protection, but also water conservation, which is when they built the water conservation areas and put some dividing levees and structures, so that the idea was, again, keep water off the populated areas, the private properties, those kind of land use areas, and be able to store them in both Lake Okeechobee and the conservation areas and move them in those directions. And so you have some more pump stations that cropped up during that time as well, in addition to these levees. So in this graphic, you see that it's basically a canal with pump stations and gates on either end. And the idea for flood control is keeping those canals at levels that can receive rainwater off of these basins itself. And again, the whole canal system down here, here's the canal system in South Dade that was designed to try to protect this side from flooding from the water in Everglades National Park. And so that all this is all kind of in the name of water conservation and flood control. And it wasn't really until the 80s when you started looking at water quality control as a bolt-on to the flood control and water conservation purpose. And so early on, it was really, in the 90s, there was obviously litigation, federal litigation, that prompted a focus and investment on water quality. And you had early STAs getting built here and there to try to capture some of the water quality as you were doing that flood control operation and treating it before it got to the Everglades. Obviously, there was still water that was conveyed to the Everglades untreated and also pumped back into the lake untreated. During this time, there was also a push to minimize the back pumping into the lake, which continues today. And so most of the focus on the flood control mission was moving it into the conservation areas. And ultimately, history progressed until there was some Judge Gold decisions, Moreno decisions, so forth, that really resulted in what we know today as restoration strategies, which is trying to capture all the water that is conveyed for flood control through these stormwater treatment areas. One east is flood protection for this community over here, eastern Palm Beach County. One west is this flowway in the EAA. 2 is both this flowway and this Hillsborough Canal and North New River Canal. 3-4 is North New River. I'll be right back. And Miami is goes over to 3-4. STA 5-6 is the C-139 basin on this one. And so when we talk about, moving water south from the lake, so we have to do the flood control purpose here, but then you look for opportunities when you're not, when the canals have capacity also, and the STAs have capacity also to move water from the lake through the STAs into the conservation areas. Right now, we have in 2025, we have to start complying with a water quality standard of phosphorus going into the Everglades. And so between now and 2025, we're doing everything we can to get our STAs ready to have that one more level of expectation put on us for delivering clean water to the Everglades pursuant to the federal and state consent decree and consent orders. So right now we are doing work. Restoration Strategies has us building out these STAs. This is under construction right now, this expansion down here. We're finishing up some retrofits in 1 East to try to get that online. STA 2 is built pursuant to Restoration Strategy and also 3-4 is, and the FEB. And this FEB is still under construction, but I want to focus mostly on this area here because that provides the most opportunity to bring water through STAs and into the Everglades, because 3A is the primary target for rehydrating the Everglades going forward. Right now, STA 2, we are trying to increase its resiliency. So we do have some construction going on in STA 2. There is a big open area that wasn't growing plants because it was too deep. So we're trying to get that re-leveled. So it's got flowway 2 under construction and flowway 3 is getting regraded. STA 3-4, we've been moving a lot of water through 3-4. And so the eastern flowway right now is offline because it got too filled up and the plants started to float and form tuxix, and the vegetation really got damaged in the first cell of the eastern flowway of 3-4. So that's offline, but we are able to use the central and the western flowway. These flow equalization basins are critically important. What they provide is, so if you think about when you need to do flood control and you need to move water, you need a place to put it that acts like a surge tank. And so each of these flowways has a flow equalization basin, which is like these surge tanks. So when it's raining and you need to move water quickly, you can put it somewhere quickly, because an SDA, for it to perform its function to get to that water quality goal, it needs to be metered at a specific rate, which we push at higher rates sometimes and at lower rates other times for recovery mode. But having that surge tank is critically important. And that also serves as an important, which we'll get to later, as to why the reservoir is important, because when you're trying to deal with excess stormwater out of the lake, you need a place to put it rapidly, which is that storage reservoir becomes critically important. So right now, when we consider moving lake water through SDAs, our real decision criteria is protection of the SDAs and the plant community within those SDAs, so that if we destroy them, then SDAs go offline, like the eastern one and 3-4, while we try to regrow the plants. And so the velocity becomes quite important. So I meet weekly, or John Mitnick actually meets weekly with our SDA managers to figure out how much we can push through SDA 2 and SDA 3-4 and 1 West at times to try to get water moving south. And we've been doing a good job of that in recent years. And we present that at every board meeting on the amount we were able to get out of the lake into the Everglades. So that's the first area that we work real hard on to strive to move water south out of the lake into the conservation areas, is getting them through these stormwater treatment areas so they can go to the conservation areas. So that's the first management challenge. The second management challenge is, what's the status of the conservation area? So what I've done here is, this is a very complicated graph, but I'll walk through it, of the water level in 3A last year in 2020. And so you can get this on our website. It's very accessible. I just cut it out of our website and put it on this slide. But up at the top, that's the rainfall in 3A every day of the year. And this is basically dry season 2020, or dry season 2020 followed by wet season 2020. And so this is obviously the wet season. And we had in 2020 Memorial Day rains, a lot of rain come through. So you can see the water level, and that's what this blue line is in 3A tick up over the regulation schedule. So basically you want to follow this level in 3A, generally speaking. This is high water levels at this line. So we early on got above the water level, or the expected level of 3A pursuant to the Corps' regulation schedule. But then it was Tropical Storm Ada that came through and dumped this amount of rain, and it just shot up. And this is when the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission closed 3A because it was flooding the tree islands, and all the wildlife was taking refuge on levees, which doesn't provide great food for this wildlife. So it's a real risk to wildlife. And so they close it off for recreational users while we work on getting that water down. And getting it down is the trick. And that's a lot of the next slides is how do we better manage 3A so we can keep it in a positive place, avoid those closures, and make it available to move water out of Lake Okeechobee at the same time. And so this at the bottom, it's important. This is the structures that we use to drain. And this blue line is the structure that is used, it's 333, to get it to Shark River Slough. And this is Shark River Slough here. There are bridges over here. So if you can get water to those bridges, then you can get a lot of water into Shark River Slough. And you'll notice it was closed for a lot of that time after Tropical Storm Ada went through because of flooding conditions in this area, which we'll touch on. These structures over here are used to get water out. But ideally, you would get it to the bridges if you really want to equalize water levels quickly. So what are we doing to try to really equalize those water levels more rapidly? So the first thing that was built is modified water deliveries. And that was a system over here that better kept water into Everglades National Park rather than it seeping into the populated areas. And this is ag and other businesses in this side. And so as you raise levels in Shark River Slough, more seeps out. And so modified water deliveries, which is these components, it was a series of pumps that pump it back into detention areas so that it stays in the park, was constructed to try to allow you to move more water into Shark River Slough. The biggest issue was, this is the 8.5 square mile area. This is a kind of a semi-ag area with residences and so forth that only has a berm. So it has a pump and a canal down the center of it, but the western side tends to flood. And in Tropical Storm Ada, this community flooded. The Everglades National Park had a really high level that was seeping into this community. So it kept this gate closed. The Corps could not open that gate to move it down Shark River Slough to manage those water levels in 3A. So this is a picture of a groundbreaking that happened a month ago, maybe a few weeks ago, where we are building an underground wall right here to better allow water to flow into Everglades National Park during those wet conditions. So that should be ready before next wet season. That is a 2.3 mile wall that is right in the critical area. We're doing the modeling to keep going, whether north or south, because our ultimate goal is to have a lot more flexibility up here with these structures here to move water to those bridges and through the park into Florida Bay, which would bring down 3A water levels and actually help Everglades National Park and Florida Bay. So that's one of the projects that we're working on. The other is what we call uncorking Tamiami Trail. It's known officially as Tamiami Trail Next Steps, but that's building the bridges, which are completed. There's a 1 mile bridge here and a 2.3 mile bridge. But the last remaining phase is to raise this road. There is a canal on the north side of this road that is fed by those structures out of 3A. In order to get more water under the bridges, you need to raise that canal higher. Right now it can go up to 8.5 feet, but we really want it to go up to 9.7 feet because the more you can raise that canal, the more the water tilts into Everglades National Park and under the bridges. So you can get much higher volumes under the bridges the more you can raise that canal. The only way we can raise that canal is to raise the road. So DOT has issued the contract. They're starting construction to raise the rest of Tamiami Trail, put some additional small bridges in here. so that that canal can be raised. And I think it's probably a 2024 type project to get that done. So that will, between the seepage wall for the 8.5 square mile area here and these bridges and the modified trail, we can move a lot more water underneath. But wait, there's more. It's the Central Everglades project. So this is a big project, and I'll start in the south. We've already finished 2 parts of the Central Everglades project. We expanded this structure here, the 333 structure, which moves water to the bridges. We've doubled the capacity, so that's done. We've removed Old Tamiami Trail, which was blocking some of the S12 structures down here. That's done. And the Corps has started construction on all the features necessary. It's taking some berms down, putting some additional flowways in, and building another protective levee here for flood protection. That mission has never gone away. So that you can basically sheet flow through this, which is called the Blue Shanty Flowway. That's an amazing amount of water to basically move under the bridge by degrading berms in this Blue Shanty Flowway. So it'll be more like a wetland flowway system to move more water out of 3A when you have those high conditions, which in turn allows you to move more water out of Lake Okeechobee. Of course, the famous EAA reservoir is here. We're expanding the capacity of these canals. So when we're in rainy conditions, flood conditions, you can quickly move water into the reservoir so that then you can meter it through stormwater treatment areas. And here's the new stormwater treatment area that we're building, and that will be done in 2023. The Corps is going to break ground this year on the first component of the EAA reservoir, or at least issue the contract. I think maybe both. So that will be underway as well. And so that provides that surge tank that I talked about, but it's a massive one, 240,000 acre feet of a surge tank, which as you fill and then meter out to SDAs, you can refill. So ultimately it adds up to about 370,000 acre feet over the course of a year. And that's on average. Some years will be more, if it's raining harder, some years less, if it's not raining that much. So that's a big project. And then of course we have basically trying to get the sheet flow through the northern part here. That's for Everglades restoration. So all these components really help you move water south even more. And then there's one more project that's getting planned. That's called the Western Everglades project. And so that is basically this basin over here, which drains through this canal into the Everglades and Conservation Area 3A. And we're still talking about how to manage levels in 3A so you can move lake water or other water into 3A when you need to. So this contains features where it redirects water that would normally flow into 3A by filling these canals in, and then basically sheet flowing into Big Cypress actually where it's needed because this canal drained it. And then on the south side, adding more culverts down in the south side, taking some levees down so that you can move during high water conditions, you can move water from 3A, even additional outlets out this way towards 10,000 Islands. And so we're actually in design for these right now. We need the planning project to continue so we can get a tentatively selected plan so that we can actually start construction, which hopefully the Corps tells us would be next year. So we'd have more ways to manage water levels in 3A. Again, we need to get them through the SDAs, get the SDAs ready to move that water, build a reservoir so we have an additional surge tank to move it south, and then be able to better manage water levels at 3A. And a lot of these features are happening very quickly. Let's see. Okay. Let me get through this. So basically, to recap on the history side, the CNSF, went in. That flood control mission continues. We haven't, that still continues. But then we've focused on water quality with SDAs, and then the hydrologic restoration ever since, which was the second half of that presentation. And really, there's just momentum. Like I said, we are building stuff everywhere. And it's all sort of centered around moving that water south. We've got, and really protecting the estuaries and restoring the Everglades. Obviously, the C44 reservoir is, if you haven't seen it, It looks beautiful. It should be coming online this fall, probably within the month, I hope, maybe 2 months. So that they can start filling that. We'll have our stormwater treatment areas up in full capacity mode starting in 2025, but really probably starting towards the end of 2023, because we got to get ready for that water quality expectation that starts in 2025. And then you've got all the SEP features, Central Everglades, Tamiami Trail, seepage wall features down south to better manage those water levels in 3A, so it can accept more water from the north, and really try to do the best we can to mimic that sheet flow. So a lot of investments happening in our upcoming budget, which starts October 1st. A lot of the projects are continuing, and we will of course remain focused on not only moving water south, but trying to clean up that water coming in from the north. We have a video on our website that kind of articulates everything that we do to try to move water south. So if you have, that's the link, just go to our website and type in Sending Water South. And it's about a 6-minute video if you ever need to share it with anybody else outside of this venue. So Mark, I believe that's it for Drew's blathering. So, any kind of discussion would be welcome and from here. So I guess we could stop sharing our screen unless you want us to go back to anything.
Yeah, why don't you keep that on in case we do.
Okay.
If somebody has a question or a thought, you can put it in the chat and we'll monitor that, or we'll try to recognize you as we can. We have about 76 participants, so it would be difficult to manage. But to start out, Drew, on understanding, kind of you mentioned about having to meet the water quality standard by 2025. And that standard, phosphorus standard, I think is that a flow weighted mean or a direct standard of 10 parts per billion? And that has to be met coming from the STAs into the water conservation areas?
Yeah, it's a regulatory permit requirement. It's based on the long-term goal. It's a water quality standard for the Everglades of 10 parts per billion. And so we have to meet an annual number for phosphorus coming out of our STAs. And I think it's around 19, that's an annual average. And then a long-term average over basically a 5-year period of about 13 parts per billion. And if we meet those, that's in our permit. If we meet those, then it will achieve the water quality standard for the Everglades.
Okay.
And Mark, this is Daryl. Can we have them stop screen sharing so we can, for our recording purposes?
Yeah, okay. Then we can
Great.
always go back to if we need to.
Yeah. Thank you.
So also to start off a question with, I know each year we're a lot of the EA basin runoff goes through our STAs and down into the water conservation areas. Last water year, the staff reported there that about 1.6 million acre feet went through, and about that was 1.5 million acre feet was from the EA basin runoff, and only about 100,000 acre feet from the lake. And in previous kind of water years, it looks very similar in that a lot of the basin runoff from the EAA is allowed to go through the STAs in there and taking up the capacity for moving water south. And at the same time, like water year 2021 last year, we put 1.067 million acre feet to the estuaries, both east and west. So is there a reason why you're having to accommodate the drainage and basin runoff from the EAA through the STAs?
So yeah, and that really goes to the primary federal authorization for the CNSF project. When that project was built, it was to provide that flood control purpose. And so, the way it's evolved is providing that flood control purpose for the EAA is really getting redirected through the stormwater treatment areas rather than not getting treated and going straight to the Everglades or going back to the lake. So there is a federal expectation, and I've had this conversation with Colonel Kelly, and he says that if you don't do it, I'll come down and do it. right? So something has to happen with those floodwaters, with those rainwaters in the EAA. And right now, the policy is to treat them before it goes into the Everglades, instead of back pumping or sending it straight to the Everglades. So as a result, when it's raining in the EAA, that water goes to the STAs. And you're right, Mark, it takes up the capacity of the STAs. So it's really, when it finally we get beyond it raining in the EAA and we can free up some capacity in the STAs, that's when we start shifting towards moving the lake water in and through those STAs. But right now, because of that mandate to provide flood protection, that's what we do. We send it through the STAs.
And we understand the need to provide flood protection, and that's a primary responsibility of the district to do that. However, we feel like, is it really flood protection or just crop protection in order to, be able to maintain those canals down at levels of 10.5 to 11 feet versus the fact that if the fields really were flooded only at 13 feet elevation. And I've rarely ever seen fields flooded in there, but understanding, that there is a need for flood protection, especially the Glades communities, and there's a need to provide some protection for landowners in those areas. But in recent years, not so recent, but in years, we've required all developments to have their on-site retention and detention of rain and before it runs off into waters of the state. So I wonder why we aren't able to require that kind of runoff or basin runoff actually be retained or detained by the EAA rather than through the STAs and into water conservation areas as flood protection. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so on the canal levels, that's kind of in a federal regulation schedule, right? It's how we're supposed to maintain those canal levels. And I guess that was developed in some sort of public, I'm looking at John so he can help me with this, some sort of public process to do that.
Correct. So the way the operations work in the agricultural areas south of Lake Okeechobee is that those canal levels are codified in the water control plans promulgated by the Corps. And a lot of the ground surface that we're talking about out in the agricultural fields, as some of you may know, has subsided over the years. So a lot of that ground surface is actually lower than what those canal levels are at times.
So it is something we're having to follow those protocols. And one of the other features in the Everglades is you have towns and agriculture, and there's not any divide structures between the towns and the ag fields. So whatever the canal level we hold at is providing for the towns and the agriculture fields. So and the way I think it works is when it's raining, the ag operations hold their water until the towns are drained, and then they start equalizing their water levels to whatever that reg schedule is. And in the rainy season, we're supposed to hold those canals lower even for those first flush rains, and that kind of thing. So it's still implementing that purpose. When it comes to the on-site retention, right now the regulatory framework is the ERP program, and that was established in the 80s, ERP, I think, 80s-ish. And so if you're an ag producer or something and you were there before the 80s, you're kind of grandfathered in. So there isn't a regulatory mechanism to put those ponds in and do that on-site retention. If you're switching from a lower, like a non-ag land use to an ag land use, you need to come in for an ERP permit, and that's when you would get that retention requirements. And you see that some in the northern watersheds because they have developed over time, but in the southern watersheds, it's just been that way for so long that they didn't get caught up in the ERP program.
So I know, and I appreciate Carol and Nancy being on as far as the Florida Forever Act or previous legislation that would maybe regulate or, cost regulation and to be required in that aspect of flood control and stuff for that, particularly the EAA. But just to kind of iterate, there are about 289 permitted structures within the EAA that drain the sub watersheds into the major canals, the Miami, North New River, Hillsborough. So are those permitted and regulated by the district then to kind of help control that runoff that comes out?
Is that to Carolyn or? I'm happy
Well,
to take-
yeah. So one question is to Carolyn about Florida Forever Act. Is there something there that is kind of regulating the district to, require them to provide this basin runoff protection? And I guess is that in the Florida Forever Act? That was a question I had.
Well, I can jump in, Drew, real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the Everglades Forever Act. But, as you know, we do have, there are some regulatory mechanisms that allow for water to be held on site. I mean, some of the BMPs that are implemented south of the lake through the district's Works of the District program have achieved that result. But beyond that, I mean, I think Drew really accurately captured the state of the stormwater permitting program, which basically provides, a level of grandfathering, and that's in state law. That's a legislative provision that grandfathers those prior uses. So they aren't subject, as you point out, Mark, very adequately. New development is required to go through those programs, but these grandfathered ag operations south of the lake have a different regulatory structure, and they're not subject to that.
Appreciate that.
And when the Everglades Forever Act went through, it was primarily focused on phosphorus control, right? So there were expectations and permits. All those permits are focused on levels of phosphorus reduction, right? So it didn't really get into quantity. Like, there's ways to reduce phosphorus, which is holding water on your land. So that was part of it. But it had a whole another suite. So it was very much related to phosphorus.
We've had some questions in the chat or some thoughts in the chat about legislation in the state have to ag, and I'll go to Eve Samples. You have your hand raised there. That's a good way to do it. So Eve.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you, Drew, and the team at the district for being here. We really appreciate it. Drew, can you talk a little bit about the costs of the STAs, who bears them, what the source of the funding is? I know some of it is ad valorem, some of it is the agricultural privilege tax, and when that ag privilege tax expires. Thanks.
I could try. So basically the whole STA and water quality framework was funded by the ag privilege tax and the Everglades construction project tax, which are both ad valorem taxes. The ag privilege taxes basically the EAA and the C-139 basin and pulls, I think, $25 per something acre.
$25 per acre. Yeah.
Okay. To annually, and generates about 12 million annually, between 11 and 12 million annually. For that purpose, the Everglades construction project, I don't have those numbers handy off the top of my head on how much but it is basically an ad valorem tax that applies to I believe the 15 of the 16 counties. And so that was also created to try to improve the water quality for the Everglades through this paradigm, which is basically you take a basin, you get some source controls in those basins, and then you build an endpoint treatment system, which is kind of the same paradigm as a neighborhood. You build a new neighborhood, you need to have your stormwater at the end of the pipe because society creates excess nutrients. I mean, just as a basic rule. So the STAs, I mean, the full build out of all the STAs is like a $2 billion effort, from beginning to end. And the annual operation of the STAs is about 20 to 22 million in annual operation costs.
Thanks, Drew.
So just to summarize, $2 billion for construction, about 20 to 22 million a year to operate. the ag privilege tax covers about half of the operations, but property taxes have covered the rest of the costs.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. And I think that's where the issue of fairness comes up, that taxpayers are covering the vast majority of the costs, but not getting the vast majority of the benefits if you're not an EAA landowner. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to go to Todd Thurlow. Go ahead, Todd.
Hello, am I unmuted? I think you can hear me.
Yep.
Thanks for the presentation, and thanks for all the information you all provide, and the fact that everything's online for everyone to get. It's a lot of information, big system, and a lot of small parts that a lot of people are concerned with their own backyards.
And
So,
you're good and Todd, I just got to do a shout out. You're great at using the information.
And I hope I don't know. I guess I might have a report later, and I hope to be corrected if I'm wrong, because I'm really out of my area. But my question, so part of my and I've told other people, part of my thing is to try to educate myself on it, and that I think I have an understanding of it. Maybe I can put what I've learned myself out there for other people to read. And in the LOSIM process, trying to educate myself on the modeling that the Army Corps is doing in the, it's basically east, west, or south, modeling. And if you can't go south, you're going to go east or west. If it's a game of whack-a-mole with the discharges from the lake. And so, the word constraint comes up a lot, and that's how you do modeling. You put constraints on your model, and if the constraint is up, it can't go that direction. And so we fall back on legal mandates that say, okay, we have a constraint because the federal government doesn't allow us to do this. So looking at the Water Resources Development Act, I was trying to understand, kind of Mark's question earlier, is what is flood control? And I see it mentioned a couple of times in there, but I don't think it's a defined term. So, my first question is flood control defined? And then the second part of that is my understanding, I could totally be off on this, is that south of the lake, there's another model called the South Florida Water Management Model, which is a pretty amazing computer system model. I think maybe John would be able to answer this. But to me, it does seem to be a crop optimization model. And so to say that flood control is a constraint when we have a system that's really trying to optimize water tables for crop yield, is that our constraint?
Two-part question there.
Yeah. So how is flood control defined, I guess, was the first one?
Yeah, is it even defined? Because is flood control, because Webster's to me is overflowing on the land, or
The rate, right?
Overflowing, so when the public hears, oh, we have to, and then I also the other term, flood control operations. So are we in flood control operations when there was water on top of the land, or are we really in flood control operations just anytime it's raining and we just need to control the water table?
I'll let you go, John.
All right, yes. So earlier, Drew walked through some of the history of how the system has evolved. And with every one of those construction projects, whether it's a canal, a pump station, a levee, there is something called the Design Documentation Report. And within that report, it defines the level of flood protection for that basin. So we translate that to be a level of service. So every single water basin in our 16 counties that we serve has a defined level of service. And I'll use Broward County as a good example. So back when the system was designed, as Drew walked through in those previous slides with the construction of the East Coast Protective Levee, that anybody who's driven down Sawgrass Expressway, if you're heading south, you look to your right, that's the East Coast Protective Levee. That portion of Broward County, when the system was originally designed, it had a level of service of 0 because it was all cow pastures, dairy farms, that sort of a thing. And the system in Broward County was set up such that the eastern areas got the priority, and they had higher numbers of 2 inches, 1.5 inches level of service, that sort of a thing, so they could drain first. But now, today, in the current system, you've got the city of Weston, Coral Springs, Sawgrass Mall, all of that is out to the west, so we've got to provide flood protection for them. So within the EAA, there is a defined level of service. It's 3/4 of an inch a day. So let's say it rained 1 inch across the Everglades agricultural area. It would take us a little bit more than a day to pull those canal levels back down and maintain that level of service. Now, over the years, through the implementation of, say, the Everglades Forever Act, there have been modifications to where we can put that water. So it has sort of changed that paradigm. But overall, the level of service defined for the Everglades agricultural area and that flood protection that you're asking about is 3/4 of an inch a day.
And in Broward East, it was 2 inches a day, or what's?
It depends on the basin as you go around. Some basins had 2 inches, some had 1/2 inch. EAA has 3/4. It's basin dependent. But yes, to answer your question, Todd, that is all defined in those design documentation reports when the system was originally set up back from the 50s through the 70s.
Yeah, so like when they're doing that LOSA modeling, then the model is taken into account that we need to provide that level of service, there's so many inches a day. And if it's above that, then the model is going to kind of say red light, east or west.
Well, it's a little bit different when we switch to the second part of your question and start talking about the models. So the South Florida Water Management Model, some people may know, is the 2x2. What the LOSUM process is using is a new version, an evolution of that computer model. We call it RSM, the Regional System Model. So we're not using the South Florida Water Management Model in LOSUM, and we haven't been using it for a number of the large planning projects, including the Central Everglades project, for a number of years now. But what it does is it's a routing model. So it's a hydrogeology, hydrology routing model, and you put in the infrastructure and the capacity of that infrastructure, and then you'll see what water levels come out of it. So to speak, it's not, in the terminology that you were using, it's not constrained by that 3/4 of an inch a day. You just apply the rainfall and climatic conditions into the model. And let's say it rained 3 inches in one particular day or week, then it'll just tell you what the resulting water levels are based on the infrastructure that you have to move that water around.
Thank you for answering that. Appreciate it. We understand. I mean, we start getting into a lot of technical parts of it. And I appreciate Todd and everyone being interested and concerned that, particularly around the time here when we're talking LOSUM, and LOSUM's doing a lot of modeling and efforts to run iterations and sequences to try to understand if we have maintained certain levels in the lake and how that's going to affect different levels. In different lake releases to different areas. So, but in part C of the current LOR's operation schedule, when we always go down that decision tree in part C, and instead of getting to a specific CFS, we're getting to the maximum practicable releases south into the water conservation areas. It's always concerning that how that judgment is made when we go back to, their capacity is full. We can't release any. We don't want to drown tree islands. We don't want to overload the Everglades. And we feel like that equity, again, is not there with the basin runoff taking a lot of that capacity and not having the capacity for lake releases south. So I understand when you have constraints, and those are both legal constraints, as you've iterated in document reports or water control plans, and we just are trying to further understand how those constraints are set up and if they can be modified or altered or changed during our planning going forward, and how that's going to affect these coastal estuaries in the future. So
Makes sense.
I really appreciate it. I think, in lieu of time, we got some other items on the agenda to report about, but Drew and your team are, if you're willing and able, we'd love to be able to further the conversation with you if you're open for that. If
Always.
we get further questions and people from the coalition or other members have an interest in questions as follow-up, we'll pull those together and shoot those to you and your team. So maybe that would be a helpful way to kind of follow up with this. But I want to
Absolutely.
express our real appreciation for you being here today.
Well, and Mark, if I may, I have been, engaging the Rivers Coalition for even in my DEP times, and it is a force to be reckoned with, which is a good thing. Change is happening, and it doesn't happen without public interest and very active groups making it happen. And so I absolutely appreciate what you guys do and gals do, because it absolutely helps us make the difference we're all trying to make. So I really appreciate it. And anytime you need us, we're here.
Great. You're welcome to stay on for the balance of the meeting, but we'll kind of get Daryl to bring back up our agenda and kind of go through some of the government and agency reports. We do have the district on there along with the core, and I appreciate many of the core people being here too. So maybe we can get some of those reports going forward, but we'll start on the agenda with Martin County real brief. So we'll do these briefs really quickly as we move through. Diane Hughes, I see you're on. Also John Mail from Martin County.
Yes, I am on.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark. Am I able to share my screen?
Not sure if Daryl or Todd can make you a co-host, and you can do that. So again, in the interest of time too, we'll kind of, I know we have to wrap up, but
Okay.
be brief. That'd be great.
You should be good, Diane.
Should be good to go now. So
Oh,
we'll
I
stop.
don't
You
know
have
what
to
that
stop
is.
sharing your screen,
Oh,
Sorry, yeah.
Daryl. Yeah, there we go. Okay, Diane.
okay. Uh-oh, that's not right.
Yep, there it is.
Can you,
Yeah, we see your screen.
okay. Thank you, Diane Hughes with Ecosystem Restoration and Management at Martin County Public Works. I just wanted to show this to you today, where the lake is at and the conditions that we have going on now. Let me tell you, Martin County has been grateful that we have not had any Lake Okeechobee discharges since the early January of this year. We are ever so grateful. What you're seeing right here, right now, the Caloosahatchee is not receiving any Lake Okeechobee discharges at all. We're getting about 603 CFS coming into our system, and that's only from the C44 basin where I live. So I guess I'm part of the problem right now. And there's quite a significant amount of basin runoff going into the Caloosahatchee. It's over 10,000 CFS. That's a pretty large amount of water traveling that way. So you can understand why they're a little upset with this coast. Salinity levels have been decreasing with the local basin runoff that we've had. In the middle estuary, the salinity levels are down. The average salinity levels are down around 10. So we're hoping once the dry season comes that we'll have some better salinities coming our way. These are in the enterococcus levels. The health department does this work. They haven't taken, haven't seen, they probably have taken samples, but we don't have the data on where we're at right now with the rain that we've been having. So back on the 13th of September, everything was looking good. And actually the Jensen Beach and Stewart Causeways were also in the good range for enterococcus. So we're doing good there. This is my last slide. Currently, there are harmful algal blooms on the lake, and algae has been reported by lock operators on the upstream side of the S80. And so between the S3O and the S80 is the C44 basin runoff. So they have been discharging into the estuary. So we probably got a little bit of seed of algae coming into the system, but we have not seen any blooms anywhere in the estuary or in the lagoon. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Diane. Yeah, appreciate that. And we'll have some updates on local, how water from Riverkeeper and myself too later. So moving on to City of Stewart and LOSUM, since Ben Hogarth, I think you're on. We're also a member of the PDT, but you might give way also and LOSUM updates, if you will, to the Corps of Engineers folks that are on the site. Appreciate them.
Hey, Mark. Yeah, thank you. not going to take the course thunder away if they want to say anything about where Lotham is, but we've been participating, certainly representing the East Coast on a lot of these initial workshops discussing what's essentially iteration 3. And so obviously Plan CC was chosen. Now it's the plan, and we're moving forward with that. So anyway, we're working on that part. It's going to be a couple months, but you know, certainly participate if you can. We always welcome people to join us to comment. But we're very positive in the direction of everything. As far as the only other thing that we would report this time is that we actually, and I'd like to thank Martin County for bringing us out there, but the Vice Mayor and I got a chance to go out to the C-44 reservoir to kind of see its wrapped up of construction, and the STA I think is already partially in operation, but we get to see that out there, and appreciate Martin County for bringing us out there, and then meeting the new colonel, and then certainly thank Colonel Kelly and his team for all the work that they've done, and the district for getting that project completed even quicker with some of the contract work that they did. So we're appreciative of it. Our only concern is that right now, just the water quality coming from the C-44 from the canal, just because of all the rain that we've had and the basin runoff. Ironically, that C-44 reservoir project is designed specifically for this kind of scenario that we're in right now. So we're hoping that the Corps, and certainly pleading with the Corps and the district to work as fastidiously as they can to get that, at least the initial fill. It's a nice little, I don't know what you want to call it, kind of like a capital gain for us that you get that water out of the canal that one time, the first time that you fill it. So it'd be really nice to get that water in there, and hopefully no issues with the construction and the integrity of the structure. It looked great when we were out there, so we're looking forward to that part. But really, we've got a prime opportunity right now to kind of give the river a chance to recover here and get some of that water that's in the canal right now to its treatment and into the reservoir. So that's our focus for the next couple of months, and be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, the C-44 project, when we stood out there with Senator Rubio and the Corps and everybody on August 25th, it was great to see that they're hopefully going to turn that on and start filling the reservoir, they said, in early November. So unfortunately, we don't have that 1100 CFS pump running right now to be able to stop that about 600 CFS from flowing through S80 into the estuary from the C-44. Again, no lake discharges, but it'd be nice to have that online. The STAs look great out there, and hopefully that project will come online and start filling the reservoir in early November. We do have the district, and I know Jackie's on the phone too to give maybe some updates of the district. And then I see Tim Geisen, Kim Taplin, Colonel Polk, Ava, and Jim and Erica all on from the Corps. So maybe we'll have a little bit from the Corps after that. Jackie, or you want to say anything about the district and upcoming or past governing board meetings?
Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it. Good to see everybody. There's a lot to talk about. I'll boil it down to just a couple of top things. First of all, thank you to executive staff for being available today. I think that, you know, problems start getting solved when people start talking, and the conversations are super important. And I want to thank the executive staff for being willing to have those conversations. Rivers Coalition, keep going. The meeting that we recently had, which was September 9th, was a good meeting. There's a lot happening as far as projects, very exciting and hopeful. For me, something that's happening has to do with communication. And I'm sure that some of you have heard me talk about the triangle. And you can be doing everything in the book, but if you are not talking, you are not going to get improvement. My brother Todd, there's issues that have to be dealt with here. Florida statute directs the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and the South Florida Water Management District to work together to reduce pollutants and achieve water quality standards in the Lake Okeechobee, St. Lucie River, and Caloosahatchee basins. So just over the past 3 months, the district has started putting out a one-pager, and they're available online. And you can see the little triangle there up at the top left corner. And Jennifer Reynolds has mostly been leading on this with conversing every month, every couple of weeks with the other agencies. And let's be real here. The district isn't the top part of that triangle. That is DEP. DEP is the top part of that triangle. Nonetheless, the district has so much expertise and respect that when someone, especially like Jennifer Reynolds, in her kind, open way, starts talking with these other agencies, really good things start happening. And it's not like you're in 3 different corners of the room going, oh, they're supposed to do that, or oh no, they're supposed to do that. No, they're responsible for that. Instead, you are together as a triangle talking within that communication triangle, and things slowly start pulling towards the middle to make things better. Some of these most recent reports are talking about all of the I don't know what to call them, but regulation issues that are now being dealt with for the first time, as far as I'm concerned. And there are thousands of them, so it's going to take a long time. But you have to get started to get things to change. So I am very appreciative that the district is leading this effort. And I think that the triangle can do as much as LOSUM. I've said it before, and I am not saying that disrespectfully. It's just if the agencies aren't being responsible to and with each other, you've got nothing. And I feel like this effort that is being led by the district is really improving relationships and making things closer to what they should be within Florida statutes, which is responsibility with the BMAPs and everything else in water quality. So thank you for letting me be part today. And also C23 and C24 is a big thing that's happening. The Army Corps is starting on those, and we need support. We have to get the EAA reservoir to the finish line, which we will. And then we have to embrace C23, C24, C25 with as much passion as we had for the other, because our local runoff, and I don't like calling it local because it's directed runoff from canals, but the surrounding basin runoff is very destructive to our estuary. And we can see that right now. It looks pretty rough out there. And so if we can get the EAA reservoir and the C23 and the C24, C25 over the next 7 years, there is tons of hope on the horizon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie, for being so positive in that aspect too. And like you said, the key word is communications. And I think the more communications we can have is, especially among those 3 agencies, is really important to kind of keep things moving and going. Moving to the kind of Corps of Engineers, the next kind of state and federal agencies on our agenda. I don't know anybody from DEP here or FWC, but I know we have about 6 members of the Corps of Engineers represented. I appreciate all of you being here. And we had a change in command for our Rivers Coalition members to know about. The change in command of the commander of the district, Jacksonville District of the Corps, was on the 9th of this month, and that changed from Colonel Andrew Kelly over to Colonel James Booth. And I've met Colonel Booth. We've invited him to come over to our coast to kind of get understanding. I invited him to this meeting, and he was unable to attend due to conflict, but he sent obviously many of his representatives, including Lieutenant Colonel Polk. Thanks for coming. And Tim Geisen, would you like to give a quick update from the Corps on any, particularly on the LOSUM or any other issue there?
Sure. Can you all hear me?
Yeah. Hey, good. Thanks for joining.
All right. Perfect. Perfect. Great to be here on behalf of the Corps. So yeah, I'll focus on LOSOM, but I do want to first piggyback on what Jackie just said about communication. I think that's one of the cornerstones of LOSOM is the communication and sharing of information throughout the process that we've had to this point and will continue to engage in with all of the stakeholders has really made it, from my perspective, a really great process to this point. The fact that we can all get together and share our ideas and have disagreements and discuss them in a really civil manner. It's been a really great process to this point. We continue to look forward to engaging with everybody as we move forward with the refinement of the preferred alternative and getting into the documentation phase, which we're getting pretty close to. So I think a lot of folks are on the PDT and probably got the email from me yesterday with an update on our optimization process. So we're working on optimizing that CC plan that we rolled out as the preferred alternative back at the beginning of August. So we've been working on some optimization of that, some initial sensitivities to try to improve things from performance in CC based on those iteration 3 goals, which there were 7 of those, which we talked about back at the beginning of August. Everybody's got that information. Look forward to any questions that anybody has on where we are with optimization. Our next engagement on the optimization portion of our iteration 3 will be in mid-October, probably the week of the 18th. We're looking to have a PDT meeting to talk about the modeling that we've done, the refinements to CC, and the optimized plan that will carry forward to complete that iteration 3. We're also in parallel with that effort, engaging in operational guidance development, which we had a workshop yesterday that Savannah Lacey from our water management group hosted, and working through the words that will go into the manual that will accompany the lines on the schedule, that ultimately those things will create our new water control plan for Lake Okeechobee that will be documented under LOSOM. So that all will come together in November. So we're looking at November the 18th to have a PDT meeting to kind of tie a bow on iteration 3 to discuss the final plan, the guidance that will go into it, and then start the actual writing of the EIS and the water control plan itself. That's scheduled then to be released for public review in March of next year. So we'll hopefully be getting a lot of comments back on that, and then work forward to revise, to address comments, and then ultimately have the LOSOM plan approved in December of 22, coinciding with completion of Herbert Hoover Dike, another big core effort that's going on at this time as well. And then I guess I would be remiss if I didn't mention the completion of Kissimmee River restoration construction. We had that ribbon cutting back in at the end of July, which is a big, huge effort and shows the what we can all accomplish together as agencies when we come together on a common goal. And so that construction is complete. We're now working on implementing the final operations plan for the Kissimmee Basin, and we'll start seeing the effects not only on the local ecosystem restoration, but also on flows coming into Lake Okeechobee. So with that, I go ahead and turn it back over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you for your team for being on the call and listening in to the coalition and our concerns and interests here in doing that. And again, we iterated the C44 project almost near completion with the turning on of the reservoir soon, and the C2324 and the IRL South plan being moved forward as we get some federal funding support, hopefully this year, and state support to keep that integrated delivery schedule moving forward. The kind of segue for the Kissimmee leads right into Paul Gray and kind of Lake Okeechobee report. So Paul, do you want to, I see you on? Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so the lake just passed 15 feet, which isn't too bad. We've had some rainy weather, so it's probably going to go up a little bit more, but barring a big rain event, we should be fine for estuary releases. The lake's pretty buggered up after Ada came and hit us last fall, took it to almost 16.5 feet. And of course, Irma took it to 17 and we lost most of our SAVs, and we had recovered some of them, but Ada has taken us back to ground zero. So we're back to where we were. And I just wanted to share one more thing. Audubon has recommended to the Corps with CC that we share the releases, the harmful releases more equitably. And if I could share my screen and show one figure to kind of show you guys where we're coming from, because it's a pretty unpopular position over there. Would I be
Sure.
able to-
Daryl or Todd, can you?
Yeah, you should be go.
Paul,
to
you're
go,
good.
Paul.
Good to go. Go share screen.
Okay. So you can see the slide.
Yep.
Whoops.
Oh,
There we are. So this is a slide that Jennifer Reynolds presented to the governing board in July, and it has harmful releases from Lake Okeechobee. And if you notice, I added this circle on here, 445 and 30. And basically the Caloosahatchee is scheduled to get 445 2-week periods of harmful releases, which averages about 4 months a year of harmful releases from Lake Okeechobee. And you guys are scheduled to get about 30, which is, great for you because that's like once every other year. And actually those 30 wouldn't come one a year. They would be in little bunches. But we realized that, you guys have a more buggered up watershed than the Caloosahatchee, and you guys get about 3 times more harmful flows from your own watershed than they do. And so we've at Audubon helped support, the C44 reservoir and the C20s and the Allapattah Flats. I was on the commission that helped get a state watershed protection plan for the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee. So you have a state component to trying to help your watershed. I continue to get blowback about distributed water management projects, but we have Calkins and we have the Scott Water Farm. And so we've been working to try to help your watershed because you do have really big problems. But the idea that the Caloosahatchee should pay a penalty for the problems you guys have, we're a statewide organization and we can't pick a favorite. So this is why we've submitted to the Corps and said, we think you ought to share the harm a little bit more equitably. And that's why we said it. And again, I recognize that's not a popular position from you guys because you're getting a vast improvement in the way CC is structured. But the other problem with CC is not only it takes it out on the Caloosahatchee, makes things worse for them, because here's the future without this 190 and their harm goes up. But this also will make Okeechobee hit the 17-foot range much more often. And so Okeechobee is going to take a hit and it's going to be much worse off under CC. So that's what we've been trying to talk to the Corps about is can we reduce some of the harm to Okeechobee and reduce some of the harm to the Caloosahatchee, because with Lowson, both of them are getting worse off. So I just want to let you guys know that that's our position. That's where we're coming from. We want to help the St. Lucie as much as we can, but it's that old idea of balance.
well, thanks, Paul. Yeah, it's kind of what we brought up today, kind of in the focus presentation, was the idea that when modeling that and trying to say, well, it's either going to the Caloosahatchee or the St. Lucie, and you got to choose which one's going to. We don't know that they're exercising putting the water south as much in the modeling effort. We feel like, we don't want the Caloosahatchee to be damaged more than St. Lucie because that just puts us at odds at each other. We're not about that. We're about saying, the St. Lucie needs no releases and minimum releases. And we want to stop all the harmful releases to the Caloosahatchee, Lake Worth Lagoon and others, but we want to move that water south. We feel like they need to address it that way rather than saying, well, sorry, if we don't put it there, we're going to have to put it over the Caloosahatchee and they're going to get 10 times worse. Yeah. And or the lake. We understand, yesterday's workshop was really important at the Corps because it was considering how to make these reductions and the water level ramp downs in order to protect the lake and keep the lake healthy. It is all about the lake and keeping healthy there, but it's also sending that water south. So we're trying to question that and why we can't pull that in. So
well, we're all lockstep about moving it south, and in the present system, the estimates I've seen is we can move about 1/4 of the problem water south, and we still got the other 3/4 that we're all trying to figure out what to do with. So, let's build the EAA reservoir and all that stuff. But in the meantime, we've just got this limited system we got to deal with. So thanks very much. Yeah, my ears have been burning a lot this week.
Well, thanks, Paul, for tuning in there. other state and federal legislation on our agenda, and then we'll move to quick coalition reports. But the state, as you know, there's been a lot of local delegation meetings. Florida local delegation house representatives and senators around the state. So I encourage you to go to those delegation meetings, make your voice heard to your local state delegation. They're starting committee meetings this next week, and they'll go through December and then start their session. Their 60-day session starts in January, early January, I think the 11th or 14th. So stay tuned for that. Engage your state legislators to make some good legislation this year going forward to help the water conditions all across South Florida. So I appreciate getting engaged in that. Coalition reports. We got the Rivers Coalition Committee updates. We didn't hear from River Kids. I know Nick Mader's out. As far as local issues go, and just to chime in before go over to Todd Thurlow and Mike Connor, basically the Roosevelt Bridge right now, it's down below 10 parts per thousand. The salinity is down around 6 or 8 parts per thousand, which is a very unhealthy situation for oyster reefs. And in the outer estuary, it's only at about 15 to 20 parts per thousand, which is normally up to 30 or 35. So the salinity is really depressed in the whole system, very murky, muddy water. And as we've been talking about, it's pretty much from the basin runoff from C23, C24, and C44. We're getting about 600 CFS there, about 550 CFS from the C24 and 200 from C23. So all those local kind of basins are kind of artificially fed through the canals and then artificially discharged into the estuary, really causing a lot of issues with the not only salinity, but the habitats, obviously, oyster reefs and seagrass. Move into kind of Todd Thurlow about seagrass. I know we had, Todd, do you want to share a report on that? You want to share your screen?
Sure, let me share my screen.
Quick shot. I was out there to the sandbars the other day, and it's not very happy.
Yeah, so to kind of look at some of that stuff real quick. I mean, here's the lake as we speak right now at about 15.24. So it's continuing to go up pretty quick, but I guess that's about where we were at this time last year. Also, just as a side note, you can see the Caloosahatchee getting an enormous amount of local basin runoff right now. They're at 12,000 CFS compared to our much smaller watershed. I mean, it's a C44, but it's a much smaller watershed, 576. So none of this water is coming out of the lake. This is all, quote unquote, local watershed runoff. And so looking at the seagrass satellite imagery, this is from the 17th, the last time there was kind of no clouds, just a couple of days ago. So you can see the river pretty brown. That's the various local canals, including the S80 C44 canal discharging. The slide right before that, it looks like maybe it was a high tide, nice blue water in there. This is September 7th. I finally got a chance to kind of run out there and was kind of in this little area over here off of Sailfish Point up near that island. And unfortunately, it looks good. This is looking a lot better. If I go back to one of the old slides where this was just complete sand, you didn't see any seagrass looking stuff in there. But when I was out there walking around, it's this stuff. It's the algae kind of matted stuff just sitting on the sand. So some of that stuff that's showing up in the imagery is not actually grass, unfortunately. And so that water that we're looking at, to kind of take a look at the C44 basin really quickly. And Ben was mentioning the C44 reservoir coming online, and, can't wait till they can pull some water out of that canal and put it in the reservoir instead of the river. This is this calendar year. This is, green bars on this graph mean lake water, because that's when both gates are open. Mark, you could tell me, I guess that's never going to be able to go into the C44 reservoir, and probably shouldn't, because that's not what it's for. So if we have an event like this in future years, that will go straight through to the estuary. I might be wrong, but here we are now picking up.
The pump won't distinguish whether that's lake release water or C44 water. So if there's capacity, it could.
But I wonder operationally if when they have both the upstream gate and the downstream gate open, if they're going to kind of be like, this is lake water, let it through. I don't know. But But like right now, only the downstream gate is open, therefore it's considered local basin runoff. You can see the rainfall down here in these little orange bars, and so they've, every single day we haven't had a pulse. They're not giving us a break back to the main screen. So as we speak, we're at 576 CFS. There's a graph down here if you all want to look at it. This is all on my website. Nope, sorry, that's the lake graph. But if you want to see the other canals, you can see here on this bottom graph here where, this is C23 and C24 and C44. They're all, at a pretty good rate right now. So when you add them all up, it's 1,300 CFS, 1,400 CFS coming into the river. And then the algae real quick. This is, if it comes up, there it is. This is yesterday's image. So it's, we've had a couple sunny, calm days the past weekend. So that's a recipe for it to start to pop up a little bit. And so over the last days, it was getting pretty clear a week or two ago with a lot of cloudy days in front of it. But as it got sunny, it's popping up again. And so on the other imagery, this is what it kind of looks like on the infrared. You see these patches of algae out there, but it doesn't look nearly as bad as, years past, but it's out there. And so part of what the Army Corps is asking in their, their optimizations is how do we consider this algae out here as to whether we should open up gates or not. Unless anybody has any questions or wants to see something, I think that's about it.
Todd, can you, for the members, put that into the chat, your link to your website here? It's so helpful and there's so much great information on it. I encourage all the members to go to that, to Todd's website here. He's done a tremendous job. Really appreciate you're pulling all this information together. It's a real technical challenge for most all of us. So I appreciate it so much. And we'll go into Mike Connor, unless Jim Moyer, were you on? You had anything to add to that? Or do you want to go right to Mike Connor, Indian River Keeper? Mike.
Hey, Mark, thanks. Hear me okay?
I'm sorry, Jim, did you want to say anything?
I did want to say that I've witnessed, manatees consuming this filamentous algae. It is not a really good food forage for them. They don't get the nutrition that they need. This is just sort of a really disastrous chain of events for the estuary. I think we're maybe looking at a regime change from seagrass based to algae based.
And there's been over about 950 manatee deaths this year, right, over the whole period. So it's really devastating. A lot of lack of food and resources. Also on the flats, that if you're out there, you can see that filamentous brown algae, which is called Lingbia, and it's actually part of a cyanobacteria as well. It's not a true algae there, but then there's other brown algae that's more coarse looking. That's like a gracilaria, and that's common to the system. It's not unusual, but how much of that grows and how much of that Lingbia blooms and covers over those grass areas, that's really a factor of how much nutrients are in the water, as well as the sunlight and available fresh water for them to continue. So just keep that in mind when you're out there doing observations. I have seen some very small, thin grass growing in certain patches out there on the sailfish flats, but I'll turn it over to Mike Connor, Indian River Keeper.
Yeah, Mark, thanks a lot. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, real good.
Great. Okay, yeah, I won't talk about LOSUM at all. It's been covered well. I do want to say that LOSUM, in spite of its, the great science going to LOSUM, we're still trying to stuff 10 gallons of water in a 6-gallon bag until infrastructure south of the lake is finished. So that's kind of a unfortunate thing. I've got a quick slideshow and about salinity and about the C44. I learned how to master taking a picture with a cell phone into my refractometer. That came out pretty good. All that blue field means fresh. So there's zero salinity at Layton Park. There was zero salinity at Shepherd Park a couple of days ago. It became 3 about a day later. That's the water at the ramp. The water at the ramp is something I would never get into. I wouldn't launch a boat in it. And I watch people walk around their boats, their trailers, and honest to gosh, the turbidity there is so horrible. is horrible. It's been zero there for many, many, many weeks. So any chance of any oyster growth back there, I think is a done deal. Next slide. Okay, a bright point. Took part in the ribbon cutting yesterday at downtown Stewart at Shepherd Park on the Orca project. This is a buffered shoreline. It's got great qualities. It's going to take the rain gardens are going to take water from that whole park and percolate into the ground. There's pervious concrete there now instead of the typical concrete at the ramp, which just causes more runoff. And if you go down to the project, read these details. It's really a really ingenious project. You know, our river. Our waters died by 1,000 cuts, but you know something, we can really bolster restoration by projects, thousands of projects around the state of Florida like this. And so it's a pretty proud moment. This is Lake Okeechobee. This is an unusual photo. I was out at 308. I'm out there about once a week. This is on the inside of the lock. On the C44 side, yeah, there is some cyanobacteria there. I did report it, and Drew Bartlett, appreciate I do talk with Drew quite a bit about this when I do see it out there on the canal side of the structure. And he did in fact go out there and take a look at that place the next couple of days. It's minor, it's not a lot, but it is in the canal in even minute amounts. Those are tilapia eating that cyanobacteria. And they weren't, I took a DO reading out there and it was around 5.3. So it wasn't they were starved for oxygen. They were actually eating the cyanobacteria. And that troubles me because people out there with the cane poles and baits, they catch and eat these tilapia. Next slide. This is on the inside as well of the 308 on our side. So there is a little bit of a gathering of cyanobacteria. I've been looking inside the S80. I have seen nothing in our neighborhood thus far, and that's a good thing. Next slide. This is the gate side. This is the lake side of 308 3 days ago. It's becoming a fixture there all summer long. I mean, this is a west wind. It blew into the shoreline. And some of the readings from DEP, the dashboard, I am encouraged by the fact that most of the microsystem readings are coming back very low, unlike they were 2-3 months ago. We were seeing it in the dozens, 30, 40, 50 parts. I think most of them are 2 parts and under. So there's not a lot of toxicity involved there. This is what we just talked about. This is rotting lingbia on the shoreline of the Indian River Lagoon, just south of Old Fort Park near downtown Fort Pierce. This stuff is all along the whole western shoreline. I've documented it all summer, did a couple TV spots about it. The media has it, knows about it. And again, it's not a good thing. It's cyanobacteria, and it extends out into the water in 4 or 5 feet of water too. I've waded out up to my armpits and grabbed this stuff off the bottom. It doesn't really root. It sort of anchors itself, but then it will float, become buoyant, and then it blows downwind and collects on the downwind side of the lagoon. So troublesome. Back on land, I'm really troubled by the increasing amount of this I'm seeing all over St. Lucie County and Indian River County. This is herbicide killing. This is the Green River Parkway of all places. And this next year, I'm really going to be digging into this and the amount of glyphosate and similar herbicides being sprayed, because we know that this gets into the marine environment with stormwater runoff and groundwater. And we know it gets into organisms. We know that manatees were necropsied, and a good amount of those manatees had glyphosate in their blood plasma. I don't think it takes a scientist or a genius to realize this is coming from our application of herbicides. This is a swale near my house in St. Lucie County. This is one of the many canals just between US 1 and Green River Parkway. They put these expensive carp into these waters, FWC, AAA carp, to eat invasive vegetation, which hurts the flow of these canals when needed. And yet they kill their food by putting herbicide treatments on here at least once every other month. I watch them come out of the airboats, watch them with the trucks, and this stuff is straight from people's backyards. This is just amazing to me. This is being done at this level. And on in the middle of the slide, you can see that's a bit of a cyanobacteria bloom I found. And it's because there's so much phosphorus in that water. It's starting to I've seen this a couple of times now in the last 2 weeks. I don't have a water sample for the bloom, but I know it when I see it. But this is all over the county. And I think it's a smoking gun. I think there's good papers out there. Do your own research. You will see there's a lot more belief now that the half-life of this stuff is in a marine environment is as much as 2 months. Look how much grass is gone. And I still wonder to myself, on the area of the lagoon south of Cocoa Beach, which is part of my jurisdiction, we don't have those phytoplankton blooms that block out sunlight. We don't have it. It doesn't happen yet. The grass is going away in droves, and we have no manatee grass left. Shoal grass is not even visible anymore north of Stewart Causeway. It's all the Lingbia and Gracilaria and things of that nature. And most of the stuff on Sailfish Flats, I looked at it 3 days ago. I'm starting to call it advanced mold because it looks like advanced mold. It looks like mold in the sand. It's not grass, folks. I hate to say that, but it's really not a native seagrass. That's what I have. A quick announcement. October 6th, I'm taking Charlotte Roman, district board member, on our boats. City of Stewart and Indian River Keeper are going to host her, and she's staying at River Palms overnight, and we're going to take her and show her the whole system from the locks to about the power plant on the IRL to give her a real good idea of what the discharges do to our estuary and make it very clear to her it affects not just the St. Lucie, but the lower IRL as well. So we're going to make her as familiar as this place, well, not quite as familiar as Jackie Thorough-Lippisch is, but she's going to get a good look at what we have here. And she's very enthusiastic about learning about our estuary. So we're looking forward to having her aboard.
Great. Thanks for doing that, Mike. And that's a good invitation to all of the governing board members to come our way and get out on a boat with you or myself or others to get involved in this estuary and understand the significance. Jackie, I think you had a comment or something you wanted to, and we'll go to members' comments. Go ahead.
I do have a comment, and I haven't said anything for a long time, but I just have to say that my heart hurts, and it also makes me furious when I hear people comparing the Caloosahatchee to the St. Lucie, okay? And that includes Lake Okeechobee too, okay? It is comparing apples and oranges. I just don't know how many people who have been in those places, not saying Paul hasn't, because he certainly has, but have actually, ridden around in a boat and compared how small the little St. Lucie is compared to the giant Caloosahatchee. It is not even comparable. And so all of these people talking about, yes, okay, we do need things to be fair. We do need things to be equitable. But at the same time, we have to know what we're comparing. If I drink a half a bottle of vodka, it's going to affect me a lot differently than Mike Flaw, who is my brother-in-law, who's 6'6", okay? And I just want us to start talking about the physical differences between those two estuaries, not just the pollution differences, because there are tremendous differences. The St. Lucie is basically a large stream. My husband and I just went all the way down the St. Johns River. Okay, so you can compare the other rivers like St. Sebastian or whatever, Turkey, that come into the Indian River Lagoon. We're just a teeny little river. We're not a giant estuary. Sorry. Thank you.
That's okay, Jack. Thank you. A large Jim, and then Eve Samples. I see your hands are up. Jim Moyer. You got to take yourself off mute. There we go. Jim, you're still on mute. There you go.
Yeah, just wanted to say that the Marine Resources Council is hosting a low impact development seminar symposia on October 21st up in Rockledge. If you want more information, please contact either me or I will get it to the Rivers Coalition website.
Thank you. Eve, you had your hand up too?
Yes, thanks. My comments pertain to what Jackie just said. I think it's really important to note some modeling that Martin County did and that Vice Mayor Matheson sent a letter to the Army Corps about, that points out how under the recover threshold for harm in the St. Lucie River has been much worse off than the Caloosahatchee over decades, the recent decades. And Plan CC, which the Army Corps selected as its preferred plan for the new lake plan, addressed that. So Friends of the Everglades, of which I'm executive director, supported Plan CC, recognizing it needed to get better for the Caloosahatchee, but we do not support any additional discharges to the St. Lucie under CC. And I think that there are many thousands of people that support the Rivers Coalition who also don't want to see an increase in discharges over what was in CC. So I know we have many representatives of the Army Corps on the line. I felt it was important to note that. We were very encouraged by outgoing Colonel Kelly's point that my dog is going to start barking now. His point that St. Lucie discharges would be a last resort. And we just hope that that continues under Colonel Booth. Thank you.
Yeah, Eve, you're right. As the coalition, we've taken a stance too that, we want the CC to be optimized to have zero releases to the St. Lucie and stop the harmful discharges to the Caloosahatchee and also Lake Worth Lagoon, as well as sending more water south. So I think that's been our kind of messaging, and we'll continue to message that to the Corps and everyone else. We have any other member quick comments? I'd like to also just comment that the, Florida Oceanographic, we're continuing to do, we have an oyster restoration event tomorrow where we're bagging up some more oyster shells to get out there in order to do more oyster restoration and seagrass restoration. We're a nursery where we're weaving in the fragments into fiber mats from the nursery and we're putting them out there. So we're going to not stop continuing to try to restore these estuary habitats, at the same time trying to advocate to stop the damage and stop the pollution to the system. We appreciate everybody's attendance today. Everything is going to kind of move forward. I encourage all members individually to stay tuned to all these meetings as they go forward. And thanks again to our district for presenting. I see you're all present down there in the room. Appreciate you very much being there and being open to our communication with you from now on. We'd like to get your presentation posted on the website at Rivers Coalition and also a PDF perhaps to distribute. So thanks again, everybody. Until next month in our October meeting, we'll see you then. Take care.
Stay safe, everybody. Have a good day.